Hi, my name is Zawadi Morris, a BK reader. Welcome to Richard Beavers Gallery in Bedford-Stuyvesant for Conversations in the Gallery. This is the second in a series of 6 monthly conversations that we're having with some of the area's most outstanding local artists who are making an impact and having a huge shape in the cultural landscape of today's art today. So we're sitting here today with Fabiola Jean-Louis. We're honored to have her. She's an art photographer. She is a fine artist. We're very excited. So welcome, Fabiola. Thank you. So this is a little bit of a reunion for us, is it not?
Yes.
We first met about 2 years ago around the same time. I think this month, actually. And for BK Reader, we were coming out and we were interviewing you. I had been hearing all these things about Fabiola Jean-Louis. You got to see her. She's making these amazing paper dresses. And to be honest with you, and I think I shared this story with you, at the time I was envisioning in my head when they said paper dresses, like paper dolls, the dresses that go on paper dolls, like the little tabs that fold over. And so I was thinking to myself, that's not newsworthy. But it wasn't until someone showed me an actual photograph of what she was doing and I was just really blown away. They were lifestyle and they were life-size dresses that were huge. They were fitted, actually form-fitted to the person. They were very intricate, they were very beautiful, and they were replicas of 15th and 16th century dresses, and I was just really, really just astounded at what you were creating. And so I had to come out and I had to interview you. But what I was really amazed at during our interview was the fact that you originally had not intended to use paper. You were originally intending to use material, because you're a seamstress as well, correct?
I am.
Yes.
I am.
But you decided to use paper, and it wasn't so much, it wasn't your original intention, and it was more out of consequence. So can you share with us the story of how you came to using paper and the relationship that you have with paper now and how that's changed everything about how you do architecture?
By the way, most of these questions are surprises, so you're good. Paper became a reality because first, as a Black woman, I learned to do without. So to make the best of having nothing sometimes.
So you didn't have material, or you couldn't afford material?
I mean,
or what
silks,
was it?
fine fabrics are expensive,
Yeah.
you know? So you can want to make these amazing Baroque gowns, but you have to have the money for them. Luckily, I was fortunate to have an amazing, talented father and the tenacity and strength of my mother that taught me to just create things from nothing. And I'm sure that that's something that most Black families
Often have to do.
have to do.
But why paper? Because the last thing I would think of, because I also sew, the last thing I would think of is paper, because you know there's limitations. It's not as pliable. You can't sew paper. What brought you to this idea that paper could be something that you could form into something that we could wear, something that normally you couldn't even imagine putting on your body and even, you know, designing as a craft? What made you think that paper could work?
It had to. It was enough to write the Constitution on it,
Yeah.
which solidified trauma for Black people throughout history till this day.
Yeah.
If it was enough for that, it was enough to wear it.
So was it an initial sort of experimentation that was working, so you decided to keep going with it, or did you say to yourself, I'm going to make this out of paper? Did you start with a certain, let's say, a certain part of the dress that you said, I'm going to use this fabric instead, I'm going to use paper instead of this fabric, or was it, I'm just going to use paper, period?
I didn't think about it. I was like, I don't have money for this, but I want to do this. And the Constitution sucks. I don't use big words. It sucks. And it had to be paper. And I work, and you know this about me, I follow more Buddhist practices. So my work is also about letting go, creating something that is absolutely gorgeous and beautiful, I hope, and then blowing it away and letting it go. And so paper talks about that part of my journey as a practicing Buddhist. creating
because it
something.
does, in a way, it does deteriorate, correct?
Decay,
Yes.
right. And I'm obsessed with that. I'm obsessed with life, with, anything that's alive and anything that's dead, and somewhere in between that. So my work is always going to reflect this, people call it darkness, this little shadowy thing, but it's a part of my work, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your relationship with paper now, do you approach paper from the perspective of, I'm going to turn you into metal, or I'm going to turn you into lace, which you've created all those things with your dresses. We're going to take a look in a minute at some of the dresses she's done, and it literally looks like metal and it looks like lace. Do you think that in your mind, this is what I'm going to turn it into, or are you like, what other fabrics can you possibly replace, and then you just end up with paper again? So how do you approach it?
Well, it's alchemy, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I want to be a magician, and I want to kind of trick the viewer into thinking that this is something else. Not 100%, just a little bit, just to get them engaged. So yes, finding ways to work with paper to make it look like it belongs in this world, and playing tricks is part of the work that I do too. I love having people train themselves to think outside of the box. And paper helps me do that. It's like, I thought that was fabric, I thought that was metal. Great, I've gotten you outside of the box. Now what can we do with that mind?
The thing that struck me about you is that magic, that confidence in that magic, that you can turn almost nothing into something. And they say that, a lot of times things are born out of necessity and out of need. Were you practicing that before? Were you always using unfound materials or, previously used materials? Was that something you were doing before? Or is this something new? Is that something that you're developing now? Always.
Always.
What are some examples of some ways?
My first memory as a kid, my father, I walked up to him and I was like, I'm bored. I think I was 7 or 8. And he found a little matchbox that was empty. Mm-hmm. And he was so involved in whatever he was doing, he just looked at me and was like, here, do something with that and come back in an hour.
Oh yeah? And what did you turn it into?
A car.
Oh.
I put wheels on it. I mean, it was a really nice car though. It wasn't like, it wasn't this like box with wheels. I made it into something. And when I brought it back to him, he was like, and now you can never tell me that you're bored. That was probably the biggest lesson in my life. And so since then, I've been making things and creating, and I don't know, I've been applying that to everything that I do.
And you're right. That's something that I think in our community, we often take for granted, that when we're in a position of, when we're bereft and we don't have the resources that we normally would want to have or we wish that we would have, we find a way. And so that's amazing to me. So even before the paper dresses, you had an art, you did photography. And a lot of people don't know that. Photography actually came before
the paper dresses.
Dresses. So, in fact, although you are referred to as a fine artist, it was actually your photography projects and the visions you were constantly creating and expanding around that sort of nudged you in the direction of styling the paper dresses. But what's also astounding is that you've only been doing photography professionally for what, like 6, 7 years?
No, now it's 4.5.
4.5 years. Wow. That's like meteoric rise. But it was about then, 4.5 years ago, while you were in medical school, correct?
Pre-med.
Pre-med, okay. Yeah. When you started, and that was on your phone. It wasn't even with a camera, it was on your phone.
My BlackBerry.
Yes.
Yeah.
So tell me about that, and tell me about your personal transformation as a result of you falling into photography, which at first started as a pastime and then later became something that you seriously decided to pursue.
Dang, that's a lot. That's great. Okay. I strapped the BlackBerry to a chair. Okay, let me backtrack a little bit. I was dealing with a personal situation in my life, and I needed art. And I read an article about conceptual photography and levitation and magic, and I'm like, I'm a fairy elf, I can do this. And then I learned that I had to do Photoshop, and I was absolutely not interested in Photoshop. And then I was like, all right, I give it a try. I tape the BlackBerry to the chair. I do my first levitation shot. And then I become obsessed with conceptual photography. And then I get to a point where at some point I'm doing more photography than actual work in medicine and my day job, which was PR at the time. And one day I just decided I gotta tell my parents that I'm doing this photography thing.
And they know you're in pre-med, and what was their
Man,
reaction?
it was crazy, because I busted my ass to be straight A's, honor roll, and really do well, and I was. And I would send them the grades and the certificates every whatever I got them, so they knew what I was doing in school. So that matched with, I'm just gonna be an artist, was just like, what are you doing with your life? Are you on drugs? Like, are you okay? Have you lost it? My mother was easier. She understood. She always had a good idea of who I was, who I am. So I don't think she was as surprised. And I did that, I left. I think I started photography, and then maybe 3 months later, I was done with 4 years, almost 4 years of med school, pre-med school.
Wow, leaving that behind, med school behind. Did you regret it at all?
I don't regret
imagine.
anything.
Yeah. What got you into med school when you clearly were an artist? I mean, as a child, you were an artist. You come from a family of artists. Both your parents are artists.
My father is.
Okay, and your siblings, both your siblings?
Yes.
Are artists?
Yes.
So what made you decide, okay, I'm going to be a doctor or a physician?
In all honesty, this thing that our culture as Black people has about being an artist, it's not valued enough. And it's no fault to them. It's no fault to my parents. It's no fault to what we've learned. But it's a matter of wanting to do better in society and be financially stable. And so I come from a culture that supports that. Be a doctor, be a nurse. Anything else outside of that is not acceptable. And I think after being a single parent, after being married for 10 years, being a single mother to 3 children, I was hungry. I was hungry for that change.
You missed art.
No, I was hungry. I was hungry for success in medicine and to challenge myself. I actually happen to love school. I'm a nerd.
Yeah.
You know that about me.
Yeah.
I love science, I love history, I love all those things. I love learning. I don't care for formal education so much, but I love learning. So I went, I gave it a try, and I was doing well. And I was like, okay, I've done the thing, but it wasn't the right thing.
Yeah, it wasn't feeding your soul.
It wasn't feeding my soul.
I'm just, really astounded that, again, 4.5 years ago was the first time you picked up a camera phone
with tape
and started photographing, and that eventually led to you understanding and mastering Photoshop to create some of these incredible pieces that are pretty much replicas of 15th and 16th century paintings that are just amazing. So a lot of people, when they see your work, they're believing that they're looking at a painting and not knowing initially that it's a photograph that you have manipulated. So you've got 2 things going on now in your work. You've got the paper dresses and you've got the photography.
I've got more than 2, yeah. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, two things that are like immediately identifiable. And you've brought them together and to create what we see now. And a little bit later, we're going to look at some of her work and some of her photography. What do you think, what would you say is the area that you feel strongest and in terms of how you lead in your art? Is it the photography, or is it the sculpting, or is it's none of those, it's everything, it's an amalgamation of everything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I decided I was going to leave medicine, I made myself a promise that before I entered art, I would do it on my terms. And that meant being a well-rounded multimedia artist. I had been doing art many years before that as a teenager. And I'm not into boxes. I'm not into titles. I'm not into what happens to artists when they're trying to just shape society, because that's what we do. We shape society. We're a part of that anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
And they get pigeonholed into this one little corner, and it kills them. It kills us. So for me, I was like, no, I'm gonna give, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do everything that I absolutely love. And for me, that's fashion, that's architecture, that's just making, that's science, that's technology. I call it the wood and the metal.
That's alchemy.
That's alchemy,
Yeah.
right? And so there's no one thing that I love more than the other. Everything just kind of blends together to do what it does, which I think the honesty of that as an artist has helped my success.
Yeah, it's creation. There's so much power in being able to understand the power of creation and being able to harness that for yourself. As you've seen your development through both of those mediums of both photography and sculpting and painting and all the things that you've done, has it given you a new perspective on what you're able to do personally? Do you approach things? Do you approach challenges like, I'm about to defeat this. I'm gonna find a way. I'm gonna create a way out of no way. Has it empowered you in any way?
It's a good question. I always approach everything with wonderment as a child. I'm often very serious in my regular life, my human life, and it's hard for a lot of people to get in because of that seriousness. But when it comes to the work, I get into my studio, I do some cartwheels, whatever it is, but I'm a kid. I become a kid again. And I think that's the secret to the work, is the wonderment, is to not lose that girlish charm. Yeah.
As children, a lot of times we don't know what our limitations are, so we just kind of go for it.
There's no sense of fear.
Right. So let's backtrack to your childhood a little bit.
Oh.
I always find it interesting to talk about childhood. Yeah. So, you as a child.
Wow, yeah.
So you're from Haiti, or your family's from Haiti.
I was born there.
You were born in, okay. Yeah. And didn't you say you have a parent that's also from Dominican, has roots in
Cuba. My father, my mother's father was Cuban, and my father's family has Cuba. So we're Afro-Cuban, Haitian, all of that, yeah.
So growing up in a household with such strong cultural influences, such as Cuba, spiritually, and Haiti spiritually are very powerful, as you know, I'm sure. And with art as such a huge overriding theme in your household, how has that informed how you approach art and your relationship with art, the spirituality part of it, the culture part of it? Is it seamlessly blended inside of it, or does it talk to you and speak to you? Does it inspire you?
It talks to me every day.
I figured that. So share, talk about that.
I start something with an idea, and it ends with me not knowing what happened. And I realized that whole journey that I don't remember is a conversation with ancestors. So
What's an example of that you can share with us?
Everything. Oh, okay, more specifically. So I think about the color, I think about the fashion, I think about the story, the concept, yeah? And then I start making maybe an hour, and then I get lost in that hour, and then I realize I've been working for 24. You know, and then I'm like, oh, put the veve there, the ezoli, you know, the whip marks, the conversations that I'm having are telling me what I need to talk about. And so I find myself constantly in and out of reality in my work. Oh, I got to put this in, I got to put that in, and I got to talk about history, but it's all very, how do you say, I don't know, fluid.
Yeah. There's I guess intention with unintention at the same time. It's kind of
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's kind of like flowing through you.
Mm-hmm.
So then that brings me to when you kind of decide on a concept. Is it something that hits you suddenly that you decided, I want to talk about this?
Yeah.
Or do you just begin creating and then kind of let that creation guide you?
Both. Both. Sometimes I know what I want to talk about. I have no idea how I'm going to do it. And I have an idea for the next rewriting history piece, actually. And that happened just from, something else that triggered that thought. Other times I go into the studio, I have no idea at all, and I just meditate a little bit, and then the ancestors come in and they're like, okay, you got to do this.
So rewriting history, at the time that I met you 2 years ago, I think you had just kind of opened and launched the Rewriting History, your exhibit. You had opened it up to the world. We're going to talk about the name in a second, which in a way is self-explanatory, but I want you to delve into it a little bit. But what has been, for me, so amazing with the Rewriting History series is the fact that we are now seeing an historical context for what not only resonates in Haiti, but has resonated for a lot of African Americans, juxtaposed with 15th and 16th century sort of scenarios. It kind of, when you first look at the photos that you're creating and how you're designing these young women, mostly black women, in these dresses, in these paper dresses, it feels almost unsettling and beautiful and tragic all at once. And
good. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah.
So, what's motivating you? Are you moving from mood? When you're creating, are you creating from a place of joy? Are you creating from a place of agony? Where do you find that you are mentally when you just decide to pick up and decide, this is what I'm gonna design. I'm upset with this, or I'm upset what's happening in the world, and we need to talk about it in this context. Because it's interesting that we're seeing black women portrayed as these regal figures in the Rewriting History. So where did those two things come into play? How did you decide that you were going to sort of, juxtapose those two ideals? Because we don't see that.
The honesty in my feelings, really. I don't think about the feelings. I just dive into them. And again, it goes back to me deciding to go back into the arts, right? I needed to be honest about whatever I did as a creator.
Okay.
And so what I hope people are seeing, which is what you've described, is this journey that I'm taking through my feelings. It's not one thing or the other. It's not me deciding that it's going to be something. It's literally, sometimes I cry when I'm making them. Sometimes I'm bleeding when I'm making them. I mean, the dresses have my own blood on them, if you look closely enough. So it's really a raw process that people, I think, are responding to.
Okay, so I want to delve a little bit deeper into seeing Black women portrayed in these sort of regal scenarios, but I want to let's go to one of the pieces that you've done. Okay, so we're going to look at this one, which is one of my favorite.
They'll say we enjoyed it.
Yeah, they'll say we enjoyed it. There's a lot going on here. I mean, I think initially most people, they see this, they look at the dress, which is absolutely stunning, and the detail in it, very stunning. And then to realize that this is all paper is almost overwhelming. But then outside of all of that, there's a story that's being told in the background. What inspired you for this? And then we're going to talk about what's going on in the background. What inspired this? They say that we enjoyed it. What did they say we'd enjoy?
They said we'd enjoy if you're silent. Actually, it comes from Zora Neale Hurston, the writer. So if you say nothing, they'll assume, and we can assume who they are. We'll assume that we're okay with suffering, we're okay with trauma, and whatever comes with that. And I needed to speak on that. I needed to speak on how true that is, silence. And it was perfect for the series because my subjects seemingly look silent. They are posing, they're not using their mouths to say anything. They're either taking up space or their faces, their expressions are saying something.
So let's move to the background.
That's a veve on her chest, by the way. So I'm almost always trying to insert Haitian culture and practices into my work. That originally in the painting, so this entire work is actually a recreation of old works. This is a painting of a dress, a woman in a dress, wearing this gown, so it's a replica of the gown. And she's wearing, the emblem that she's wearing on her chest in the brooch is an English one. So I changed that to the veve.
What's the veve? I know what the veve is, but can you tell us what's the veve? Because it's very specific to Haitian culture.
Well, donta is the one that I used for this one. And so that's important. I'll try not to go too deep into it, but the reason why it's important is because it is what helped spark the Haitian Revolution. Before we went into war in Haiti to win our freedom, fighters went to voodoo priestesses. They wanted to hear, kill them, fight them, you will win. We went into magic to get the strength to do what we did. So in order to understand Black freedom, I think we need to remember that it starts there in voodoo. We live in a society now that shuns it, right? And forgets that our Black freedom is very much rooted in that culture. And that's what I'll say about that. If anyone wants to read more about it, they should. Okay. But they should know that Black freedom is very much inspired by voodoo.
Even in African American culture,
That's specifically what I'm speaking of.
Yes.
We won in IT, but that's what inspired the Civil War here in America. But that all stems from the belief in the power of voodoo.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're looking at this beautiful woman. She has a look on her face. I mean, it can be interpreted many ways. I see sadness in her eyes. And then if you look closer in the background, you'll see something going on. And I think this speaks specifically to, they say, we'd enjoy it.
The rape scene.
Yes, it's a rape scene. And we're going to look at some other paintings as well, but there's always in your paintings a message that's you know, I wouldn't even say buried, but that kind of like lies in the background that is the preface to everything that we look at originally. And so she represents, I'm assuming, the mulatto that was born of what's happening back here.
Very good.
Yeah, and what made you decide to dress her up as someone who is dignified and regal, and she even has a little dog?
Well, see, so rewriting history is always going to have the woman as this regal being, which is always a challenge for me too. So I've created a challenge for myself because I will never victimize my subject. So it's, you know, one thing to put the whip marks on the back of a dress, which we'll talk about later, but it's another thing to tatter the dress and make it worn and dirty. I will never do that. I will never make her the victim in any story. So to answer that question, she's always going to be regal. And she's always going to have pride. The interesting thing about this piece for me is who has more, how do you say, civilization, the dog or the two dogs raping the seemingly black female in the back, who, by the way, this is an original painting, 16th century, that I recreated and repainted myself. And I found it interesting that the artist who painted this made this female look like a creature. She's not even human, right? And so they're raping this non-human black thing that's supposed to be a black woman. So I wonder, does the dog have more civilization than them? So it's to question civilization. It's to question who are the real animals? And what does that look like? We get so hooked up on, you know, we're not animals, that dog is an animal. Well, we belong to the same damn species. So this is another part of me adding my science knowledge into the mix too, like what is an actual animal? So let's just get past that part because we know what that is. Now let's talk about civility, and let's talk about, you know, what makes a human being a good human being. And this dog in front of her is standing there or sitting there with more pride and honor than they are.
What is she thinking? She could be thinking many things, and I'm looking at her. Is she sad? Is she reflecting on the scene in the back? Is she looking forward?
Good, I like those questions. I think the viewer should decide that. I think that she can be thinking anything the viewer wants her to, because they're probably all correct. And the set is also made of paper too, so that was hard.
You mean the curtain?
The curtain is paper, the background is paper, the floor is a painted paper thing that I created, yeah.
I actually had the fortune, I'm gonna see if I can narrow it, zoom in, to see this in creation.
Yeah, you did. You came when I was painting that.
This is amazing right here. It looks like silk. Give us an
Thank
idea.
you.
And all of those flowers are hand painted, correct?
Yes.
First of all, how long did it take you to make this dress?
Without breaks or with breaks?
In total.
4 months?
4 months? Okay. When you say to yourself, okay, you see this picture, obviously you said it's a replica of when you see these pictures and you see this, which looks like it obviously was made of some sort of gold lattice or silk, what do you say to yourself, okay, how are you going to replicate that? How is that done? What do you say to yourself?
I crack my knuckles, literally, and I have a book of experiments. So it starts with experimentation. Actually, no, it starts with research. It starts with trying to find pictures of the dress front and back. So I'll look at MoMA catalogs, any museum catalogs. because the paintings never show the back of a dress, really. So to get it aesthetically correct, fashion-wise, I have to do that. And then I have to find a way to zoom in on the pattern. So it's always teetering between actuality of what it is and what I think it is from what I can see, and kind of making it up as I go. And then I get that. It takes about 4 or 5 months to get that one shot.
This right here is just beautiful.
Thank you.
This lace that you've created.
Oh, that lace was the bane of my existence. That lace took, by itself, I would say a month to create, because it's every white detail is hand painted on that.
I wish
So
we could
that
zoom in
was
just a
hard.
little bit more, but so when you see something like this, obviously you saw it in material form initially, and as actual lace. Are you rubbing your hands together like, oh, I can't wait to master this? Or are you thinking like, oh my God, how am I going to recreate this?
I'm like, oh my God, I'm scared.
I would end up throwing up my hands.
It feels, you know, did you play double dutch as a kid?
I did.
It feels like playing double dutch. It's like, I'm like going in, all right. And then you like kind of do the mumble when you get in there. And then you're like, I got my flow. And then you start, that's the process. It feels like double dutch. Yeah.
I get it. I definitely get it. So let's look at another one. We're going to scroll through quite a few, but we're going to stop at some paper, all paper. What about her bracelet? Is that paper?
This bracelet is not, but we'll talk about the one that is.
Yes, because I know you have created jewelry
Yeah.
and hardware.
This is new into the
paper.
series. Yeah, this is a newer, I think this is probably the 3rd dress in the series. And so I was still working out my paper obsession, and I hadn't worked to the jewelry yet.
Okay.
But yeah.
And then again, this is, if you look at it, most people would assume it's a painting. It's actually a photograph
Yeah.
that she then uses a photography program to manipulate to look as though it's been painted, which...
Yeah, it's hours in Photoshop, so that takes about 4 months to make the dress. And then it takes about 2 weeks to edit, because I paint in Photoshop. And so what you're seeing is real. The lighting is real. I always work to get the lighting correct in my photograph, no matter what. But the aesthetic of having the skin and everything look the way it does requires me to paint in Photoshop and do these things, because I could have just had a photograph, but I didn't want that for the series. I wanted something that could be hung in museums, a contemporary spin on what a painting is, to insert us in a space that we haven't seen Black women. Conquistador, number 2.
Love it. It very much so looks like a painting. It's almost hard to believe that it started out as an actual photograph.
Yeah.
Her features are so striking and outstanding. And I want to know what kind of lipstick she's wearing.
I have a color in Photoshop that I use every single time, and it mimics mine. This is number 1.
Yeah,
this is with the same model.
Yeah, this is her. Oops, let me go back. Oh, let me see. Sorry. This is her.
Yeah.
And zoomed out.
This is with the full outfit. So she's wearing a paper fur. So this is actually a recreation of Henry VIII painting. I had no idea how I was going to recreate fur out of paper.
But you did it.
And I learned
it's amazing.
real quick that it was hard. But it was done.
It's that alchemy. I see a little bit of hardware there. That's paper?
No, so again, this is me thinking I'm going to start making paper beads. This is not that yet.
Okay.
So the beads are pearls, or they're not real pearls, but they're just added pieces. Everything else is paper, including the hat. This is the first dress.
Yeah, and this I know for a fact because I saw you recreating this recently. Not this exact thing, but something very similar, out of paper.
Yep.
And so it, like, again, this looks like metal in her dress, and this is actually made from paper. And the process included hot glue and painting on top of that to create layers. Do you want to talk about that? Because you see what's inside of her dress. There's always a message to whatever it is that you create, and you always take it that one step further, which is just mind-blowing. It just takes my breath away.
Thank you.
I can't even get a chance to concentrate on the details of the dress before I'm brought into a story that is familiar. You see that's cotton, correct?
Yeah.
And you see the man that is hanging inside of her dress. What were you intending to tell in this particular piece?
Well, that was the first dress ever created, and I decided that I needed to go out with a bang, or not go out, but open with a bang. And I knew what I wanted the series to talk about. I was still making my mind up about whether text would be used often in the dresses themselves. So that's why this dress is different than every other dress, where it has text and it has a cavity box there, cavity showcase. But this really shows the different ways that I'm thinking about the series. It shows that I'm reading, I'm doing research with the text, I'm talking about social injustice, I'm talking about history, and I'm bringing paper in. I wanted it to be obvious with the first piece that the dresses were made out of paper. And so we get this multi-layered dress that is not of any period, actually. This is a mashup of different periods between 16th and 19th century. And so as we move through the series, we start to see the styles more focused as they move forward.
What was the name of this one?
Rest in Peace.
Rest in Peace, okay.
Yeah.
And this
is the same dress out, yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Tell us about this one. This one is very luxurious and many layers. And it's just, how does it not rip? How do you get these models inside of these dresses without it tearing, absolutely coming apart?
I mean, I have to give credit to my models though, because Yasra before this shoot is like, how am I gonna sit in this thing? And she's got this look of panic on her face that you cannot see in this shot at all. And I just kind of fluff it around her. She sits down, and we take the shot. This is me kind of being a jokester. I don't know. I was kind of like hee laughing as I was doing this, because it's titled Marie Antoinette is Dead. That's a voodoo altar there. So it talks about us not being able to practice voodoo and not being able to celebrate and dance to our culture after we were enslaved, right? So we had to run into the woods and hide and practice at night or whenever we could. So it's to bring that conversation in about what I was saying earlier before, how important that part of our culture is, and that it was taken away. So she's holding a voodoo doll. So it's maybe suggestive that the subject has put a hex on Marie Antoinette. But I'm also kind of, for me, and it's not a joke that I don't think, it's not meant for anyone else to get. It's just for me to laugh and say, she's probably like done a hex, pushed her over a bridge or something, and taken her place. Like, yeah, I've taken my rightful place, and Marie Antoinette is gone, and this is me, and I dare somebody to move me from this seat. So that's the look. And luckily, I wasn't able to convey that to Yasra, but she had the concept, and she was able to make sense of my artist brain and give me the look on, because the look on the face is everything, and it does that. She dares you to move her.
Yeah, see it.
And she's like, yeah, I did that. I did it. I took care of her.
also one of your early pieces that
Yeah.
I absolutely adore, because what you see initially, you begin to look at the dress, and then you look at what she is painting, which recalls some painful history, not only, I'm sure, in Haiti, but also here in amongst African Americans, which are the whip marks. Obviously, he was a slave. And then when you look even closer, you see that that's also reflected in and on her dress right here. So tell me about this.
That was a hard piece for me.
Hard to create in terms of technically, or
No, hard to put the whip marks on her dress, because remember, I never want to victimize my subject, ever. And I wanted it to be but it had to be done. It had to be done for this, and I needed to figure out a way to do it without victimizing her, because she is absolutely not a victim in the story. She is to show that she's a survivor of the past, and then she's a reminder that it's happened, but she's absolutely not a victim. And so I had to reconcile with that, putting that on the dress.
What's the name of this piece?
Madame Beauvoir's painting. By the way, a lot of people don't know. So Madame Leroy, Beauvoir, these names come from my family name, my mother's name. So Leroy is my mother's maiden name. Beauvoir comes from her sister's name. So I've chosen women in my family to be named after these pieces.
So the women in your family obviously have
Or vice
been
versa.
Women that have shown strength. I mean, I think we all can point to women around us, whether they be blood or not, that have just been hallmarks of strength for us. The women in your family have been particularly inspiring for you. And
Absolutely. If I'm having conversations with ancestors, then I'm absolutely looking at my line, my family, because these are people who are going to be ancestors at some point. And I'm celebrating them now before they do.
Right. Okay. There's one more I want to take a look at that I just was always impressed with, and I know not much conversation I've heard much around it, but this. I love this because I still can't believe that this viola or this violin is made entirely out of paper. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes. How did you tell us about this process and the images on this violin and what it's about?
So I knew I wanted to create a violin out of paper, and that was no easy task. I had no real violin to reference, just pictures. And so I created it. But it's to talk about song and dance. Again, talking about us singing and dancing in the woods and sound, and summoning our ancestors and our magic to do whatever it is that we need to do. But I needed to think about it in a way that resembled European culture. And so that's not going to look like the drum. That's not going to look like, African instruments. And I was like, what can I use that would do that? And one of my favorite instruments happens to be a violin. I don't play, but the sound of it is one of my favorites. And so it was like, okay, I'm going to use the violin to bring in that European aspect, to talk about sound, song, and dance, and how we communicate with that. This is a second piece that relates to the passing piece, where she's playing it, to talk about women who pass. And unfortunately, and I'm using that word very aware that it's layered, it's triggering. I don't care for that word too much. But Black women who have, different complexion, that are lighter, that have to choose between their Blackness and safety. Blackness and being treated a certain way, which is completely unfair. And what that looks like. That trauma is very silent sometimes. It looks silent. And that talks to that. That talks to someone who cannot necessarily outwardly celebrate their Blackness, but is communicating with their ancestry in another way.
And I've noticed, and everything you do is so deliberate that this is one of the few pieces where there's media. So we're seeing newspaper, and usually you take the newspaper, you turn it into something else, and in this case, you allowed the media to be present. What is that? Is that part of that conversation? That the fact that we're being talked to through this newspaper,
absolutely,
and communicated?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's music notes, there's books deliberately chosen. I specifically looked at books that had text on it because I'm not necessarily just thinking about the photograph, I'm thinking about the prop. So this violin exists outside of this photograph today still, and it's something that I have in which you've seen in my studio. So how does that sculpture stand on its own? So I'm thinking about that as well.
Okay. So we're gonna go a little lighter just for a second, and talk about, let's get a little bit more intimate. So I have a personal secret obsession, and it's, don't worry, it's not that interesting. It's with numbers. I have this obsession with numbers. I don't share it with too many people, but everything is math to me. And ever since I was a child, I counted everything, divided, multiplied, matched it up against things, always looking for patterns. And I still have that tendency today. That's me. Share with us one of your unknown secret obsessions.
Oh my gosh. Wow, that's hard. And you know that's hard.
Talk about what you go back to often, almost every day. So when I think about it, I have more than one actually, but numbers is always something I can go back to almost to the point of, OCD. So talk about, we all have something OCD going on that we kind of keep undercover. Share with us what really down deep motivates you and drives you each day.
Wow. I thought I'd be able to keep that secret forever. I have an obsession with death.
But that's not necessarily, it depends on how you view death.
It does.
A lot of times people view death as the end, and that's not necessarily so. A lot of times people view death as something sad. And my relationship with death, personally, it's beginning to change, but for a long time, I was afraid of death. I thought it was something to be avoided. Aging was something to, always try to fight against. And we're now living in a time where we're having to confront situations where people are dying around us unexpectedly, prematurely, and sometimes, unexplained. So it's forcing us to kind of look at death from a different direction. I've had a conversation recently with someone about how a lot of the people who are passing are often some of the best people we know in life, and why would they be taken from us? And then another conversation around angels, that sometimes, their work is done. They were angels, and so they're being called back to do more work in the afterlife. Talk about death to us. How do you view death? And do you look at it as something that's macabre? Maybe not. Maybe you look at it as something as a continuation or an elevation. How do you?
Both.
What do you use it for in your life?
I use it to make me a better person. I use it to try and live a good life as a good person, because any day could be your last. So it's an inspiration for me to be better. It is macabre, and I like that. I'm a dark person. I accept that part, but it's really to be better. And curiosity. I am a very curious person. I mean, I could just get lost in my curiosity all day long. And death feeds that. But at the same time, people see death as this darkness, but I see it the other way. You can't have light without darkness. and vice versa. And in darkness, there's things you can see that you can't in light. It's just too obvious, right? So it's a challenge to kind of take the spirit and go into a place that's uncharted territory.
Absolutely.
So.
I mean, and it's reflected in your work. It's
Yeah,
absolutely
I think so.
reflected in your work.
I can't get away from it.
I mean, when we think about darkness, you say you like what's dark. When you think about darkness, those are the areas where secrets lurk. Those are the areas a lot of times where people tuck away skeletons.
Voila.
Yeah, where things are not supposed to be discussed, but you are like, guess what? We're gonna discuss that.
Let's talk about them. Let's
Yeah.
dig up some bones. Yeah, like, I mean, it's fun. It is. We suppress so much on a daily basis, right? And if we can not do that so much, I think we would be sharing more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm going to shoot off. We're going to wrap up. We're going to wrap up on a light note. I'm going to shoot off a series of questions. And I'm going to fire off questions, and I don't want you to take too long to answer them. Just think about them for a second and give your first response. But this should be fun.
Okay.
Okay. So, coffee or tea?
Coffee?
Fruits or vegetables?
Oh, how do you choose? Both.
No, you can't do
I
both.
can't do both?
No?
Vegetables.
Okay. Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla.
Music or books?
Music.
Android or iPhone?
Oh, damn. Android.
Okay.
Even though I use an iPhone now, I'll say Android.
You're gonna say Android?
Yeah.
Okay. Sneakers or heels?
I cannot.
I can't do it.
I wear both. I love them both.
You love them both.
Yeah,
Okay.
can I do both on that one?
I'll give you a pass. Yes. Sweatpants or jeans?
Jeans.
Okay.
No, sweatpants.
Sweatpants? Okay.
Stop trying to guide my decisions, guys.
Superman or Batman?
Damn. I know.
No. We get there.
Superman or Batman? Batman.
Batman.
He's dark.
Batman or Spider-Man?
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man or Black Panther?
Shit. Black Panther. I mean, but by default, I have to say Black Panther. No, he's awesome.
Okay.
Black Panther.
Netflix or the movies?
The movies.
Okay. The 70s or the 80s?
The 80s. The 80s all the way.
The 80s or the 90s?
Shit.
I know. I have a hard time with that one too.
The 80s.
The 80s?
The
Okay.
80s.
Board games or video games?
Video games.
Eddie Murphy or Richard Pryor?
Shit. I gotta go with the one that came first, Richard Pryor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King or Malcolm X?
Man, oh man. Can I do both on that one? Because they're so vital and they're so different.
Yeah.
And they should both be celebrated equally.
Miles Davis or John Coltrane?
Damn. Oh, Davis? No. Coltrane? I don't know. Coltrane?
Coltrane? Okay.
Coltrane.
Now and Laters or Lemon Heads?
Now Laters, that was easy.
Okay.
The original Now Laters, not that soft crap that you get now.
Yeah, that's not it.
No.
Patti LaBelle or Whitney Houston?
Patty.
Patti?
She did that thing.
The little bird thing.
Yeah.
Prince or Michael Jackson?
Prince.
Prince. Sesame Street or Electric Company?
Electric Company.
Okay, I agree with that one. Biggie or Nas?
Damn. Biggie.
Okay. Ebony or Jet? Was that before your time?
It was, but I can remember, but I like history, so I know them. I will say Jet.
Why?
They were more raw to me.
Yeah.
They just had a little bit more zing to their spice.
I think there was I asked my husband the same question, and he said Jet because they had the beauty of the week. And he was like, that's the only reason why we bought it, was to see who was the beauty of the week that week.
They just had a little extra zing.
Yeah, it did. Okay, the Partridge Family or Brady Bunch?
Brady Bunch?
Addams Family or the Munsters?
Addams Family.
Pink Panther or Bugs Bunny?
Pink Panther.
Los Angeles or Miami?
I know Miami more, so I'm gonna just say Miami.
Brooklyn or Harlem?
You trying to like get everybody to judge me, honestly. Awful. Damn. Because of its history, I will say, damn, no. Because of its history, I'll say Harlem. Ooh. Even though I'm a Brooklynite, complete Brooklynite, I would not live in Harlem. But I will support one of the most richest Black towns in history, and that was Harlem.
Yes.
So
that's true. Deep history.
Yeah.
Facebook or Instagram?
Really? Mm-hmm. Instagram.
Instagram or Twitter?
Instagram.
Okay.
Okay, wait, back up. Facebook for the first one.
Uh-huh.
And then Instagram for the second.
So it's going to be Facebook or Twitter?
Oh.
So it's basically Facebook and then Instagram. Okay.
Facebook.
Okay, final one. Good Times or Cosby Show?
Good Times.
I agree with that one.
That was good. Don't judge me anyway.
So thank you so much, Fabiola, for joining us for this hour and blessing us with your knowledge, your background, your inspiration behind art. When is your next exhibit coming up? I know that you recently had a show opening at the DuSable Museum in Chicago, which was absolutely amazing, back in October of 2017. What's up next for you?
A collaboration with the Jean-Louis siblings. We're doing a large installation that we're working on pitching to the DuSable for their next huge opening. So that would be awesome if that happens. And then I'm going back to rewriting history. I thought it was over. It's not, because everybody wants more.
Yeah, you said at one point you were done with the paper dresses for a while.
Yeah, I was like, I'm done. No more paper. But I have to keep going. I want to keep going.
You want to keep going. And once you are done, or at least taking a break from the paper, where do you see yourself? Are you going to go into painting? You have so many skills. You're a draftsman, you draw, you're a painter, you're a seamstress. What do you think you're going to be doing in your next iteration after rewriting history?
Sky's the limit.
Of course.
I want to keep sculpting. I want to keep making paper sculptures. So large installations of paper, but I need to hold my camera again. I haven't held it in a while. So I'm working on slow shutter now, and how to capture what the human eye can't see. So the series may be called Walking with Us. I don't know, maybe.
You have a sort of magic that, you know, I guess from the outside, looks like, how is it that she's creating this? But, you know, I think some of us here know, and both you and I know, that we all have that magic inside of us. We call it Black girl magic, but we all have that magic inside of us. What's some advice that you could offer some of our viewers today about tapping into that magic and being able to create and unleash what's inside of us to its fullest potential? How can we start? Where do we start?
Don't compare yourself to anyone. First place is to understand what you have to offer, and you can't do that if you're comparing yourself to anyone. And once you stop doing that, You can do anything. I'll keep it simple and leave it there.
It's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining us.